So as I was sitting there listening to the conversation and reflecting on the comments made earlier, be bold, be brave, be honest, be authentic. Kim, I think you're a stunning example of that. So thank you, and thanks, Susan, for leading the conversation. So for those of you that don't know who I am, I'm Jen Beeden, and I'm a proud member of the MedTech Women founding team. And I want to spend the next few minutes talking about what we have to offer you after this fabulous conference is over today. So by a show of hands, Amy had mentioned this earlier, how many of you have attended one of our regional events, either here in the Bay Area, Southern California, Minneapolis? Great. Good. So MedTech Women began experimenting with fireside chats back in 2012 and 2013, thanks to the trailblazing efforts of Nicole Osmer and Nancy Lynch. And building on those experiences and listening to the feedback that we were hearing from all of you, Laura Palmer-Lohan and I pitched the idea to the MedTech Women team that we should expand our reach by offering multiple opportunities for all of us to engage throughout the year. And furthermore, we wanted to go to you and actually engage in multiple regions outside of the Bay Area. So Amy and Deb said, great, how about you guys lead that effort? In true MedTech Women fashion. So Laura and I agreed to team up and spearhead the effort, and thanks to the contributions of 15 incredible women that comprise our regional events team, MedTech Women has offered 9 events across 3 regions in 2014 and 2015. And we're not done yet. Oh, great. So on behalf of the entire MedTech Women team, I'm thrilled to announce the MedTech Women Board of Directors Event Series. For the first time, we'll be offering a series of 3 events held across multiple regions, and the overarching theme is charting the course, navigating the boardroom. And this emerged from multiple conversations with our constituents. So many of you had expressed interest in getting advice from others about how to manage the dynamics in the boardroom. And then some of you are also interested in how to best position yourself for a board position. So the series will kick off October 28th in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Anna Safransky and Ameza Reitmeyer have organized an impressive panel of accomplished and dynamic female executives, like Stacy and Sing Sing here, who have played critical roles in shaping their medtech companies both in the boardroom as well as in the corner office. This series will continue on November 11th in Southern California, where the conversation will focus on current emerging trends in board leadership. And finally, we'll round out the series right back here next year in February in the Bay Area. So these events are going to feature women who know the boardroom, C-level executives, presidents, EVPs, and you can find additional details for the Minnesota event on the table tents that are there in the middle of your tables, thanks to Sprig. So I'd encourage you to save the date, and you can expect to receive an invitation to register very soon. So after this fabulous day is done, you still have more MedTech Women events to look forward to. So now let's transition back to the program at hand if the next panel wants to go ahead and come forward. I am delighted to introduce our next moderator extraordinaire, Karen Drexler. As a founder, advisor, board member, and investor, Karen brings a diverse perspective as a moderator for our next panel, which will explore current and future investment opportunities in women's health. Karen, the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you. And as we're getting settled and started, I want to highlight there's another element of technology that we haven't made use of today. If you go back to the app for the conference, again, the tag is in the back of the program, there's an opportunity to put questions into the app. So as the panelists are speaking, I don't think we've used this feature at all today. You can go in, there's underneath the agenda, within the agenda, there's an area where you can add a question, and you can see what questions have been asked, and you can rate them, and it will help us in managing questions at the end, and that way you don't have to hold your question till the end. You can type it in as soon as you think of it, and we'll have it available to us. So I'm delighted to be here to moderate this panel, and actually delighted about the whole day. Since MedTech Women started, it seemed that having a focus on women's health as part of women in healthcare would be a terrific way for us to all spend a day. Putting together this panel was tremendously fun because we're all really interconnected. So lots of overlaps here. I've been very active with both ASTIA and Springboard, which are two nonprofit organizations that, if you don't know about, everybody should know about. They focus on supporting female entrepreneurs. And one of the things that both organizations had understood from way back is that women founders have a much harder time accessing capital than male founders. And so both organizations are very focused on helping founders that are within their groups provide or gain access to capital as one of the big parts of their program. In addition, through my work and the companies that I've been mentoring, over about the last 10 years, I've gravitated toward more and more women's health companies with women entrepreneurs, and have noticed that funding for those companies is harder still. So that's really the impetus here in terms of the panel, is to talk about why that is, what the opportunity is, what other people are missing, and what it's like to raise capital in this environment. So Anala, who's an ASTIA board member, and Tracy, who is very active with Springboard, are the founders of funds, the first two funds ever that are focused on investments in the women's health space. And they'll talk about why it's important to have a focus, to have an expertise and experience based here, and talk about why there's some great opportunities, again, that other people are missing. We have Janica and Serbi, who are our live case studies, two female CEOs working in women's health, and both have been motivated by their own personal experiences, which is one of the things I love about the women's health area. It's often motivated by something that people have experienced directly. So they'll talk to you about what it's like to raise capital for a company, and both of them are in an interesting position where they're dealing with parts of the female anatomy that might be hard for some people to talk about in the mostly male financing environment. So that's not the one. Okay. Is this the?
Yes, this one.
Okay, so before we start, Janica has raised a couple $1 million, mostly from angel investors, so she'll talk about that experience. And Serbi has raised about $5 million, largely from venture investors. And just a little fun clip here, in addition to her work with VCs, she also swims with the sharks in other ways. So we can play that little clip.
New at 8 o'clock tonight, a happy ending for a baby shark, which has become known as Buddy the Shark. A woman and her husband found the beached shark near the Sutro Baths in San Francisco this past Sunday. Crown 4's J.R. Stone has more on what happened next.
You're looking at a beached baby salmon shark nicknamed Buddy, taken this past Sunday near the Sutro Baths in San Francisco.
Yeah, he was cute. Like, come on, buddy. And, I'm thinking that too. All right, buddy, it's time,
Serbi Cerna may be laughing now, but Sunday she was focused on saving Buddy. With the help of her husband, she tried pulling him back into the shallow water, but it didn't work. The waves were too strong.
Eventually, I convinced myself to hold a shark by the tail and start swimming into the open ocean.
A scene that was recorded by onlookers. You can't see the shark here, but you can see Serbi as she made her way into the deep waters, past the strong waves to release the baby shark.
If I didn't try it, that he was likely a goner. And he had very, very many rows of teeth, and they were very sharp, It was very clear to me that he could easily take off a finger. Okay, so as I was swimming out there and after I released him, I actually pulled my fingers in, and I knew if he bit me anywhere else, it would hurt like crazy and I would bleed a lot, but that I wouldn't have a limb missing. So
Serbi's husband was on shore, watching everything unfold.
And all of a sudden I came up for air, and I could hear him saying, "That's enough, come back now, come back now." And I turned back, and he's pacing back and forth on the beach, and he's waving his arms,
You could tell the shark couldn't make it out there, so that means it's hard to swim out there. So I didn't know at one point when it would be dangerous for her. So at some point I just kind of freaked out and just called her back in.
With her hiking clothes still on, Serbi made her way back to shore as Buddy the shark appeared to make his way back to the open sea.
I gave her a big high five.
What was really sweet is as I made it back to shore, I got a little round of applause. My husband gave me a high five. And, we waited for about an hour, and he didn't come back, so I felt really pretty good about that. Yeah.
J.R. Stone, Crown 4 News.
So we heard earlier about being bold. This is an example of what you need to be a successful female entrepreneur in this space. So with that, let me turn it over to Anila to talk about her work in this area.
Right. So I'd like to talk to you today about funding for women's health. And I want to make it clear that we are focused on funding women's health rather than female entrepreneurs. Particularly, it doesn't matter to us whether they're men or women. The focus is women's health. However, we have a small portfolio that I'd like to tell you about, and it's about 50-50 women and men. In this context, let me back up. So before when we had this idea about the need for a fund focusing on women's health, we thought, okay, let's have some data about how much venture funding goes into women's health. Now, our study isn't exact. We went to VentureSource and picked out companies over a 15-year time frame in the top 20 life science venture capital firms. So it's not exhaustive, but this is a audience participation opportunity. Anyone take a guess as to what the number is? Okay, thank you, both of you.
They're still coming. We'll give it a second.
Okay.
Interesting that it's skewed at the end.
Yeah. So it is about 5%, and it matches about the number. It's about 4% women VCs. So and although there's no strong correlation between women VCs and funding women's health companies, but that is about the ballpark number. So this, so I thought, okay, this means that there is a need because there's a big opportunity in women's health, right? And I thought, everyone's going to say, why didn't we do this? So I went to talk to some good friends, and they said, we keep away from bikini medicine. We don't want to be embarrassed at board meetings. We don't want to take the risk of saying inappropriate things. They were very honest, actually, and I respect them for that. And, why should we do it when there are so many other opportunities? It's not like we don't have other things to fund. So if there weren't anything else to fund, yes, but why, when I have a choice, would I choose something that, A, I can't really empathize with and don't understand at a fundamental level, and B, that carries all kinds of baggage, and no one's really made much money in female health. Give me examples. So I went back and looked, and yes, there are a lot of exits, but you don't have the kind of cardiovascular huge exits. Conceptus until now was sort of the biggest one I could point to. And recently, Sprout Pharmaceuticals was bought for $1 billion by Valiant. So female sexual health is finally on the map. But that didn't exist. So I was showing wins, but they weren't the 10x, they weren't the unicorns. So this was a hurdle right from the get-go. I also got asked, is this a marketing ploy? And I said, no, it's actually a real need. And then I heard back, perhaps the differences are exaggerated. And we don't have much data. So bit by bit, with each round of discussion, we went back and got more data. What we realized is, yes, the data aren't perfect. There is a paucity of data, but there is 20 years of research that is pretty compelling. And the data are not exaggerated. So the name of our fund is Exclaim. Please note the 2 X's and the non-traditional name. And the,
It's working.
So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how we define women's health, because it's a large and, again, a non-traditional universe. So in the center are the companies or kinds of companies that deal with the core differences between male and female biology. And that is what everybody thinks of as women's health, right? And so when they say it's a small opportunity, it's not a small opportunity, even if you think just in the middle, but that's where it is. Then the next circle, the outer circle, are those diseases in which men and women have very different biology. And we talked about cardiac health this morning. In Alzheimer's, it was commonly believed that the prevalence of women was due to the fact that women outlived men and that it was purely an age effect. But now there's compelling data that suggests that the biology is different. Likewise for depression. And then in the outermost circle is where women are making decisions on behalf of their other members, their children and the elderly in particular. So we have a very holistic view of women's health, which is different from the way that it has traditionally been defined. So sitting back and thinking, okay, so what do we do now when, how do we make this case to the sources of funding? We decided that we would create a small portfolio to demonstrate a few things. A, that there are opportunities, that there is deal flow, that we have a network, that we are able to get into these deals, and that we can contribute to these companies in a substantive way, and that the entrepreneurs would talk to the decision makers who would be our funders about why that's helpful. So in this sort of somewhat of a uphill battle, I would like to share with you some of the things that we learned. One of the interesting findings, there's all the predictable stuff about most institutional investors being men, and that you can just imagine. But something interesting that I learned about high net worth women and family offices, we learned today that much of the wealth in the US is controlled by women. Because women in general think more about others and are very compelled by nonprofit type opportunities, almost every high net worth woman I spoke to wanted to invest in women and children in India, in Africa, or somewhere else. They wanted to get their money out to help the bottom of the pyramid, which is a very virtuous and wonderful instinct. But I was struck by the fact that they didn't really think that their healthcare needs were not well met. They didn't really think that. They thought that they were pretty well taken care of. They didn't want to dig in, and they really wanted to save the world. And this is a theme that keeps coming back. Women are wonderful about taking care of other people, but not that good about thinking about themselves and their own health advocacy. And this is something that I would like to see us collectively change. Again, I love women. I like being a woman because of that fact, because we think beyond ourselves. But on the other hand, if we don't also advocate for ourselves, it's going to be a very long road. So the way I see it, if you think of a sort of a club sandwich, you have the regulatory, you have the reimbursement, you have the doctor, then you have, just male, and then you have women right at the bottom of that, right? And so the signal to noise of what women are thinking, A, they don't want to talk about it too much, and B, even if they do, it's highly insulated. And so I will conclude by saying that we need to help ourselves and society at large by showing and making women's health a great business opportunity. The regulators are seeing the need for women's health. The academics are seeing the need. The NIH, the government is seeing the need. But the hole or the lack is in business recognizing and having something to show. The problem is business is always looking back, right? Especially investors looking back. Have there been things in the past? Well, in a time of such intense change, the past isn't that instructive about the future. So we need to rally together and show that there is a blockbuster business in women's health. Thank you.
So very similar, as Karen mentioned, we up here overlap a great deal and enjoy working together. So I've been in traditional venture for 15 years now, and one of the things that I thought was interesting with Kim was to talk about working in something you're passionate about. So I've done deals, devices, health, therapeutics, etc. And I realized I really wanted to do deals that I could talk to my family and my friends and my kids about, and people would nod their head that those things mattered. And not saying that drugs and devices don't matter, but something that was a little bit more about the consumer and the patient and the people that we all care about very much. So when you look at healthcare changing, everyone in this world knows it, what we decided to do is look at venture completely differently and look at the idea that as consumerism meets healthcare, women are the most powerful consumer for economic reasons, for other reasons, and healthcare is not ready for it. And therein lies an opportunity, is can you put those two facts together and find companies that are capitalizing on the fact that women are going to choose with their wallets better care, higher quality care, maybe even going outside the established system for that care. And therefore, there were a lot of interesting opportunities to find there and capitalize on. So I don't have to tell anyone in this room how this paradigm has changed, but it really is about shifting earlier into prevention and wellness. It's a huge area of opportunity, we think, for, again, women are very active in prevention and wellness measures, not just for themselves, but for who they care about, and changing the conversation from care to health. And what that looks like, and staying healthy, and being proactive members of that. And for us, that's an area that we'll talk about in a little bit, is really attractive. People want to talk about impact of healthcare. This is our paradigm that we believe holds true. If you want to make a difference, you have to touch the female health consumer. We've talked a lot about that today. And from our perspective, looking at this paradigm and how you have to get to long-term impact on costs is to not just get earlier in the cycle of health and prevention, but also to affect those who are making those decisions at the table or with the clinicians in hand. So you've seen this statistic, another poll. I don't know how to make it. Do I have to do anything? No. Not a technology person. So what percentage of decisions for health are made by women?
There you go.
So I think the stats that have been thrown out earlier today were around percent of healthcare dollars as opposed to decisions, so it could be a little different. Just to throw that out there.
Thank God, because I was about to get first.
Go ahead.
Did I just push it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Should be working. There we go.
There we go. We skipped one then. Here, let me go back. 90% of decisions, not dollars, are made by women. This is really, to Anala's point, and we align on so many of these matters, we've got to think about health differently, and we have to look at solutions that align to the values that matter to women. Not saying to exclude the men, we want men to be healthy too, but when we talk about decision making and how the new model of healthcare has to be delivered, the consumer voice is imperative, and the women control that voice to a great extent or influence it very strongly, even when clinicians are involved. And so we talked this morning too about the social effect of women. I choose a lot of my health decisions based on recommendations from my friends, far more so than any other source. It's a reality that healthcare needs to evolve in, and we talked about with clinical trials. Sometimes you can use social media to find patients, sometimes you can't. So we have to take a step back and look at companies that have found parts of this evolving model to create an opportunity that we believe aligns to the values of women who will ultimately be the decision makers. And this is, again, more our specific kind of twist on this is on intervention and empowerment, taking control of your health and being part of the discussion and the decision. And so this is where we completely align. There is a universe of really exciting companies. You're about to hear from a couple of them. But the idea is that venture capital, and again, love the field, feel very fortunate to be part of it, needs to start thinking about this differently. And the reason we put our fund together was really to say, we're happy to be the ones in the room leading a deal on vaginal dryness. We'll do all the dirty talk for you. We'll help you put it together. And we do believe there are many enlightened venture funds, male VCs, who will do these deals. They do see the merit, but they're not going to walk into their partnership and say, hey guys, there is a vaginal dryness deal. We have got to do this deal. So we're happy to be the lead investor in that case and help soften that conversation a little bit. It's a little easier to say there's a syndicated deal going around. It's got a lot of interest. Folks have done the work. A little bit easier to help that conversation and move the deals along further. That's it. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Janica Alvarez, and I'm a co-founder and CEO of Naya Health. I'm very excited to be here and talk to you about something I'm really passionate about, also a personal struggle that I had actually returning back to work. Prior to founding Naya, I actually spent about 10 years in biotech, clinical research and drug development. All while I was working at Genentech and Gilead Sciences, I was growing my family. I had 3 sons in that period of time. And I remember being terrified each time I had to go back to work. Not so much that I didn't want to go back, but I was really struggling with finding technology that would allow me to still take care of my family while I was away. And millions of women struggle with that same problem. So Naya Health was really kind of born out of my own frustrations. And what we're really dedicated to is providing insight to families through smart products, and we're really focused on mom and baby. So I want to start out with the B word. And so we're going to talk about breasts, and we're going to talk about pumps. And I don't know how many of you in the audience have interacted with this lovely device, but I have for about 3 or 4 years straight for my 3 sons. And I can tell you that I hated every second of that process, and I'm sure you did as well. And it's really unacceptable. So I'll get into why that's unacceptable and really kind of talking about how long these devices have been on the market, but yet they haven't really been improved. I want to lead with this poll question. Well,
there it is.
There it is. Okay. So the question was, if you guys missed that, how many women in the U.S. initiate breastfeeding once baby's born? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and jump in here. So the 2014 CDC report card of the U.S. Stated that 79% of women initiated breastfeeding. But the unfortunate fact is that many women stop breastfeeding shortly after returning to work because they continue to struggle finding technology, and that works with them. Whoops, how do I go back?
Just the other arrow.
That one? There we go. And this is actually why. This is why women struggle. This is one of the many outdated products that women have to interact with when they go back to work, called a breast pump. It's really the only device that we can use as mothers to continue to provide breast milk when we return back to work. There is no better alternative out there. And breast pumps have been on the market for over 20 years, but really have not made significant improvements over the last 2 decades. And that was really something that was very frustrating for me because I thought as a woman entering the workforce, I wondered, how come everything around me is getting smarter, yet the technology that women rely on so heavily is completely outdated, hard to use, and women continue to hate that experience. To me, that was just really unacceptable. So I resigned pharma and I decided to start a hardware company and really centered around what I am most passionate about, and it's really kind of connecting the family. So Naya's initial product is really focused on completely redefining this experience of using a breast pump. So our initial product is a smart and stylish breast pump that mothers no longer need to be embarrassed by actually carrying that around the office. It's customized, so you can customize it to your own experience or your own personal style, and many other great features, not to mention it's hospital grade, so it's also very high performing, which was one thing that women really wanted us to develop. Beyond that, we actually have this accessory that expresses milk faster. It's really designed to work with other pumps. So really kind of broadening that opportunity to other moms to kind of experience Naya's brand. And it captures data in real time, and I'll talk a little bit more about why we feel that's really important for women. And then most importantly to me, and as I was going out into the field and talking to a lot of women, they wanted something that felt more organic and like they were nursing their child. And I remember one specific story of a mother that I spoke to, and she said, Janica, I didn't give birth thinking that afterwards I would be nursing a machine. And that's absolutely true, and it was really an emotional journey for her, and it is for many women. So at Naya, we're really trying to make this experience more natural. And I won't say completely enjoyable, because nothing will ever replace nursing your child, but this is a step in the right direction. So getting back to why we're smart, what we can actually do with our technology is provide real-time feedback to mom around her production, giving her insight on what, in terms of her lifestyle, impacts that production over time, and really being a source of support. So we're really kind of turning into this personal assistant for mothers in particular, but then also supporting the entire family through other value-added services. And so one thing I'll say before I pass the mic to Surbi is that this journey has not been easy, but it's been worth it for me. I have an incredible team of individuals, all of whom are parents, that are really dedicated to solving the problem. I will say that it hasn't been easy, right? But it's been a problem worth solving. And the reason why I say it hasn't always been easy is it's always challenging, I think, telling the story to an audience, because you never know who that person is. So 2 stories that I'll quickly share with you. When I had pitched this idea to investors, everyone's always so concerned about who's taking care of my kids while I'm pitching my story. And maybe they're taking care of themselves, I don't know, but I'm here. But I have a 6-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 4-year-old, and they're taken care of. I can guarantee you that. But what makes me mad is I don't think they would ask that of my husband, and that's not fair. But I usually shut that conversation down pretty quickly. The other thing that actually happened to both Karen and I was an interesting story, a bit dysfunctional too, but we were at a pitch with a group of angel investors, and Karen was actually sat kind of in the middle of a room on a chair, right? It was like pin the tail on Karen, and it was just a really weird setup. And then I had our appearance model that I was passing around to individuals so that they could see kind of the unique design and the materials that we were using, et cetera. And the gentlemen in the room were afraid to touch this product. And so I remember they were snickering and making some comments, and then one guy went like this when it was his turn to pass the breast pump. And I'll never forget that, and I don't think Karen will either. But at the end of the day, I'm glad to be a part of events like this. There's a bigger call to action here. Naya's initial focus is this area, but there are other segments that we will also be going into, all while supporting families along the way. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for watching that shark video. Yeah. My lead investor immediately asked me whether or not I had Keyman insurance. That was their reaction to that. Yeah, it's a fair one, right? So my name is Serbi, and my interest in women's health actually began when I was in high school. So I was writing a paper on Emerson in my bedroom when all of a sudden I felt such a sharp pang of pain that I could barely make it to my mom and say the words, "My side hurts," before blacking out. The next thing I remember is waking up in the hospital. I didn't know it then, but it was going to be the first of many trips. So eventually I had my diagnosis. I was suffering from a complex cyst, but the physicians couldn't tell whether or not it was cancerous because a blood test, a very poor blood test called CA-125, was also extremely elevated. So my choices were to either have that entire ovary removed in high school or to wait and see whether or not that mass disappeared. So it was sort of at that time I thought there must be better solutions to this problem. And from that, 15 years later, was born Envision. So Envision's a venture-backed medical device company in the clinical stage. We're developing products for early detection of ovarian cancer. Through this product, we're hoping to shift when ovarian cancer is caught. So the problem is that 85% of all ovarian cancers are caught in late stage 3 or 4, where the 5-year survival rate is less than 15%. Now, if you can catch the same disease in stage 1 or 2, the 5-year survival rate jumps to 90%. And unfortunately, these numbers of how late this cancer is detected is also true with women who are at high risk for developing the disease. So we all know about Angelina Jolie's mastectomy and the fact that she had the BRCA mutation. Her mom actually passed away from ovarian cancer, and just recently she also had her ovaries removed to prevent the risk of that cancer from showing up. So what's done now for patients who are at high risk for the disease? The first line of defense, if you can call it that, is a transvaginal ultrasound. There, the physicians look for a mass. Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, once there's a mass, that means the cancer is already a bit later stage. And secondly, the ultrasound only tells you whether or not there's a mass. It doesn't tell you whether or not that mass is cancerous, which is the position I found myself in, and unfortunately 15 years later is still true. The second option that physicians have is a blood test. Okay, it's a picture of someone taking a blood test, so it's not that. Okay, so it's a blood test called CA-125, but unfortunately it has a false positive rate of 50%. I mean, what do you even do with that? Like, how is that helpful? So it's great for, one physician told me, it's great for finding late stage cancer, and I'm tired of giving my patients death sentences, right? So we really need to shift, again, finding an early solution, early detection solution for ovarian cancer. So the only real option that these patients have who are at high risk now is to have an oophorectomy where both ovaries are removed. And according to an NIH trial, 15% of the time that the ovaries are being removed, there's a serious adverse event, and not only, some of the obvious impacts of having your ovaries removed. Okay, so again, it's just slow. Is it slow? Okay, so is not being able to begin a family. But the other part of it is when you have your ovaries removed, you have early onset of osteoporosis. Cardiovascular disease kicks in at an earlier time. I kind of explain it to my male investors as a castration. We have balls too, we just have the decency to keep them inside. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal to have this done early. And if you're diagnosed at age 30, I mean, it's a tough choice. And having to have made that choice myself, hoping to do something about it. Okay, so what if there was a test that on an annual basis, when you go in for your pap smear, you could also have a pap smear done for ovarian cancer as well. And you could actually collect a cell sample and see in those cells whether or not there's cancer present. Not only cancer, but pre-cancer as well. So that's what Envision is developing. So Karen asked me to share a couple of stories about fundraising. and about some of the challenges specifically related to women's health. So one of those challenges, I think, is so when I was at Berkeley finishing up, I realized, even though I knew I wanted to go into women's health, that most innovation happens in the cardiovascular space, right? That's where most medtech is focused. So I worked for several years, first at Abbott and then other device startups, building catheter-based devices as an engineer. And realized, oh, shoot, this totally, I forgot that the slide was here. Sorry about that. Let's talk about how many people in the US, or how many women in the US, do you think are at high risk for developing ovarian cancer? Hint, I'm a CEO running a company. And fundraising for this. There we go. Oh, yeah. That's right. Good job. Joanne actually corrected me. This number is much higher than what I put here. So it's 1.2 million women each year who are at high risk for developing ovarian cancer that have no other option but to have their ovaries removed. Okay, now jumping back into my stories. Okay, so one of the problems is when you want to make the switch into women's health, where do you start building that network? I was just talking to somebody over lunch about, how do I reach out to gynecologists, for example, if that's the area you want to focus on and really build out those relationships. Well, for me, moving from the cardiovascular field, I didn't know any other gynecologists besides my own gynecologist, so that's an option. You should really put yourself out there. So it was kind of an interesting dynamic in the middle of a gynecology appointment, just saying, hey, so what do you think about this idea while you're down there? But you should put yourself out there. It tends to work out sometimes. Other thing is, so when I raised my first round of capital, there was a word I had to say a lot to men, and I realized that I had they had interesting reactions to it. Some of them would lean forward, some would lean back, some would just look really confused. And I don't get what the big deal is, maybe because I have one, I'm not sure. But doing small things, like when you're first, having that initial meeting, saying transvaginal instead of vagina, really helped me. And it really helped, I should just say it really helped them. Not like fall backwards when they heard the word. So interesting challenges being in women's health. And so with that, also, it's not just VCs who have the reaction, right? It's the press as well. So after the last round of funding, I did an hour-long interview with Bloomberg, and I thought I was speaking about a lot of various important topics, but there's one particular thing that they honed in on, which was the vagina story I just told you. So editor's pick of the week, title was, "To pitch VCs, just don't say vagina." Investors love that. Their favorite CEO. Okay, so in conclusion, I just want to say good indignation brings out all one's power. And so this started off as an issue I had that I really wanted to change. And I started off as an engineer with 5 years of experience with the slide deck and a dream. And there's 2 women here today who are sharing this table with me, Karen and Anila, who absolutely threw their social capital behind me, and their capital, thank you, to make this happen. And now we've treated 30 patients and are close to getting FDA approval. So thank you both so much for your support.
So with that, we'll jump into questions. We actually do have a question from the app, so thank you. And the question is about the use of, maybe a couple of questions, about the use of crowdsourcing, given that women are controlling so much of the financial resources and healthcare is becoming more consumerized. The device that is represented here that is the most consumer device is Naya. Is that something you could talk to, Janica?
Yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. So I think crowdfunding as a whole is a bit controversial when you're talking about a regulated product. when I started NIA, I didn't know, even though I'd been in clinical development and drug development for over 10 years, that breast pumps, electric breast pumps, are actually Class 2 medical devices. It requires a simple 510K submission, right? There's still a lot of paperwork, no clinical trial data necessary. So the controversy comes into play where is it really smart to try to market a device before pre-market approval? And that's something that I've struggled with, but at the end of the day, I think that there are ways around that. But don't tell Wilson Sonsini I said that. But what we've come to grow more comfortable with is actually getting the story out there and getting some awareness around what we're doing and raising money through other means. I don't think you have to fall back on a crowdfunding campaign, but you certainly can. You just can't ship your product. Hint, hint. So there's that. I do want to say that there are options out there for those that are trying to raise money for products that are unique to maybe women, and you're having a hard time finding the funds for that.
It is a really intriguing option, though. I think a lot of people are looking at that and trying to figure out different sources of capital, given how difficult it's been.
Can I just say,
Yeah,
there's I'm sure there's more than one fund, but there's InCube Ventures has a portal where qualified investors can actually do side-by-side investments in their fund. It's the jury's still out as to how legal it is, just because the regs haven't been formalized, but there's somebody out there trying it out. It's interesting.
Yeah. We also have a question about whether it's difficult to attract men to work on these women's health issues. So maybe both Janica and Serbi talk about the composition of your teams. And Janica, I think you actually had a problem the other way, trying to find the right woman for your team.
I did. Do you want to take this one first?
Oh, please.
You want me? Yeah? Okay. Thank you for that, Serbi. So finding a female engineer is really hard, and it was a very complicated process for me. So I had been interviewing a lot of individuals just within my network. My husband, who's actually my co-founder and works for me, so we can get into that later. And we just really struggled. A lot of men were applying, fantastic, but what's unique, I think, about our design in terms of our flange is it really takes someone who's either worn one before and kind of gets it, and then also who's comfortable going to some of these beta sessions with me and testing the product on women. And I certainly can't bring a man. I suppose I could, but I wouldn't want to put my testers and my moms in that position. And so how I solved that is I just started to ask for more and more help, and I actually reached out to Karen, who is actually all of these women are my investors. But I told her I'm having a really hard time, and can you help me? And so she reached out to one of her other portfolio companies, who then put me in contact with a phenomenal engineer. So beyond wanting a woman, a female engineer, I also wanted a lactating female engineer to really take that up a bit further, so that she could really empathize, I think, with the end user. And that was so incredibly important for me, and I do look at that in every one of my hires. So ultimately, I was able to find my nursing mother, who has a PhD in mechanical engineering from Stanford and has about 5 years of industry experience, and she's been a phenomenal wing woman in my ethnography and speaking with users.
Our team consists of about half men, half women. Interestingly, all of the guys on the team have daughters, so I don't know if that has something to do with it. I think most of our male investors also have daughters. So, and outside of the gender breakdown, our team has people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. So I think, as Kim mentioned, there are some things that men are good at, some things that women are good at, and I think that's reflected through diversity just generally. So that's something that we strive for. I actually don't think we did it by purpose, but it's kind of fun to have so many different backgrounds and experiences presented at the table during every decision making.
Yeah.
Actually, I wanted to add something too. It's so we're, in starting our fund, have used interns, college, high school, and our last two who've been really phenomenal were both young men. And I have to tell you, when they came in, I said, have you read what we're going to do here? And shared, some of Janica's stories about, we might have women come in who make sure your parents know you're going to be working here. But I have to tell you, it was really inspiring to me to see these are, college seniors. We had a summer intern who just got out of high school who was going off to NYU. And these guys came in and did a phenomenal job and were incredibly engaged. And it was really nice to see that hopefully this isn't an issue in 10 years. But I do think it's an interesting way to bring people into the conversation.
Definitely.
One of our portfolio companies for stress urinary incontinence, and it's a 60-year-old man who's the CEO and the main proponent. So we are seeing a lot of men who are actually interested in the space, but they too have trouble raising money in the space unless it's a totally surgical intervention.
There's one more question for Janica. Somebody's here with a Medela pump who's interested in when you might be on the market.
I'm serving Serbi right now.
And maybe another question
And
is if you need testers.
So yes and yes. So we are actually going through our 510K process right now, and we'll be able to ship product early next year. And I am always recruiting women who are lactating, so I always appreciate when people volunteer. My only criteria for this trial is that baby is at least 3 months old. But please get a hold of me if you're interested in stopping by my office and trying our system.
One thing Janica didn't mention, mainly because the technology didn't support us, she was going to play the sound so the person who submitted this question knows well what a Medela pump sounds like. I think anybody who's ever used a breast pump never gets that sound out of their heads.
Right. I'm wondering,
yeah.
Can anyone simulate? Jess, I know you can.
Yeah.
And everybody can hear it, even if you're in a lactation room or a bathroom stall or driving down 101 and people are looking into my car and I'm waving like this is what's happening.
So I'm happy to note that the pump that Janica is developing is virtually silent. If there's any noise in the room, you just can't hear it. I think that's one of the great features.
Right, and I think that's, when we were out beta testing, because we were doing a lot right, but then there were things that we could improve on, and I think that the key value add for us is that we do have a virtually silent breast pump, so it adds to having a discreet experience for women, especially at work, and then also having the hospital-grade pump. I think women don't have to compromise on performance or having convenience at that point. So I'm very proud of this pump.
Are there questions from the audience that didn't get sent in? Okay. Great. Thank you so much. Can I jump in? One quick question.
All right, one quick one. I just have questions. I know you had mentioned that, just one quick one. You had mentioned, investing in technologies that were also, conditions that afflict both genders but are different in women. And I was wondering if you could speak to any companies that have made progress in that, or it sounds like a really intriguing and necessary endeavor, but just haven't heard a lot about it.
I think CardioDX is a poster child for the different scores for men and women in cardiovascular. We are seeing several diagnostics being developed to look for differences. As you know, diagnostics take a long time to be developed, so that yes, and then there are also companies in the developing drugs that are actually different for men and women. So on the device level, it is different diagnostic tests, be they imaging or molecular. And then the drugs as well. And one of my pet peeves, just because you let me say something, I'm going to subject you all to it, is that we're so excited about personalized medicine and all that. And literally, I can't tell you the number of people who are geneticists who look at me when I say that isn't the first step or a step even in personalized medicine that we have an X and Y, we have two X's. I mean, isn't that sort of a big place where you want to look? And another just little anecdote is that humans are 99.8% related to each other. Chimps and humans are 98.5% related to each other. men and women are 98.5% related to each other. For whatever, I don't want to make too much of it, but that is the difference. And yet, we are exercised about one tiny mutation in one tumor, and we are not thinking about this glaring, obvious step. Thank you. Thank you.